Hello everyone. Today we're going to paint a very neutral, rustic daisy painting. This painting is for absolute beginners. You don't need any experience to do this painting. It's very easy. It doesn't take too long. We are using acrylic paints. They dry very quickly, so keep that in mind. You know, if you get paint on your clothes or anything, acrylic paint is permanent. We are going to be needing a glass of water, some paper towel. The brushes that we're using today are going to be a Filbert brush. So with Filberts, I feel like the sizes really tend to vary. My size 12 may be totally different than your size 12, but I would get a small to medium size Filbert. And then I've got a size 12 pointed round brush. And then I have a size 12 bristle round brush. So we're gonna start off filling in the background. The paints I'm using are Liquitex Basics. The colors we've got are titanium white, and I've got two little piles because I'm gonna use one for my background and one for my flowers, for my daisies. Unbleached titanium, yellow oxide, cadmium yellow medium for the center of the daisies, and then some Mars black. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with our background. Take your size 12 bristle brush, and I want you to dip it in your water, but I want you to take your other hand and squeeze out the excess water. If you don't do this, this brush just holds too much water in it. So just dabbing it on your paper towel is really not enough. You wanna clean it out and then kind of squeeze out the extra water there. So we're gonna start off filling in the background, and we're gonna do a gradient, meaning it's gonna go from dark to light or light to dark. We're gonna start at the top and keep it light up here, and it's gonna get darker as we go towards the bottom. So I'm starting with Unbleached Titanium, and this is an 11 by 14 canvas, but you could use any size that you'd like. I have it turned vertically here, and I'm gonna take Unbleached Titanium and I'm gonna start to fill in my canvas with vertical brush strokes. So I'm using longer brush strokes, but notice I'm having them kind of all start in different areas. So I'm gonna grab just a teeny bit of water now. I'm not gonna dip my whole brush in. And I'm gonna use that to help me carry this paint a little bit further here. So the paint is thicker in some areas, thinner in others. I'd go ahead and wait to paint the edges of your canvas. You can do that while this dries. So I've got it kind of filled in here, thicker in some areas, thinner in others. And I've kind of run out of paint here as I get towards the bottom. Now I'm gonna take a little bit of white. So I'm just gonna dip my brush in the white here without cleaning my brush out. And I'm gonna do some streaks of white. So maybe I've got a streak up here, one here. I'm doing it completely random. So you can see right now they look like bright streaks of paint. And I'm sorry, there's such a crazy glare on it there. Let me see if I can fix that. So right now we've got streaks of paint. What's gonna happen if I continue to brush over the streak, right? Eventually it's gonna blend completely with the unbleached titanium, and it'll just turn into a lighter version or a tint of the unbleached titanium. So you wanna brush it over just until you like the way that it's blended in. You don't wanna keep brushing forever and ever until it all looks like just kind of one color. So I'm gonna add a few more streaks of white in here. I love using streaks when I'm painting. I'm all about it. I'm gonna kind of go to town here. And notice my brush strokes are fast, but I'm not pressing down hard. I'm very lightly kind of flying across the canvas. Look what happens if I press down hard. I just kind of remove the paint and then I end up with a little glob. So I'm just kind of lightly flying across the canvas. So now I'm gonna go in, I don't need to clean my brush out, I'm just gonna grab a little bit of my yellow oxide here. So my darker yellow that I have. And I'm gonna use less of this. So I used a lot of white, a lot of unbleached titanium, a lot of regular titanium. Now I'm grabbing just a little bit of yellow. I'll start in this corner and I'm just gonna add it in randomly with little brush strokes. I'm brushing over those to blend them in a little bit. Very, very lightly flying over the canvas. My handle is vertical. So now I'm going to come down here to the bottom and I'm going to use up whatever extra paint is on my brush here to fill in the bottom, and that way I've got some fresh paint so it's wet and workable. And now without cleaning my brush out, but if your brush is super dry at this point or very thick dried paint, you can clean it out. I'm gonna come in with black from the bottom. So same brush, I'm gonna take black paint now. My brush stroke's gonna start on the bottom of the canvas and I'm gonna flick my brush upwards. So without adding more paint, I'm gonna go all the way across to first kind of get a base. And now I'm gonna start dragging it up even a little bit further. And you should have basically no black paint on your brush at this time. You basically wiped the majority of it off. So now my brush stroke's starting at the bottom of the canvas and I'm lightly flicking my brush upwards, barely touching the canvas. If you're seeing a lot of the texture of the canvas underneath, you can add a little bit of water to your paint, or use just a little bit more paint. So it should be turning gray on you. And I'm gonna have the black go up to different heights. So you know what, I think I'm gonna do a little bit of a gradient in terms of the brush strokes going shorter from here, and I'm gonna have them go longer as I go over to the right. So I'm gonna take the black up further and further. Okay, I'm running out of paint over here, so I'm gonna need to add more, but before I do that, while I barely have any on my brush here, I'm gonna add some of my gray up here to the top. So you gotta be kind of bold with this here. Just choose where you wanna add it in. I barely have any paint on my brush, so it's not doing a whole lot. So now I need some more paint down here because I was just kind of running out. One option would be to take just water, and that will help you kind of fill it in. The texture of my canvas is just kind of disappearing there now. Grab a little bit more water. And the other option would be to just add more paint in. I'm going to use water because I don't want this to take too long to dry since I'm teaching all of you. I'm going to carry it up a lot higher before I add in more black. I'm going to come up here, really kind of fly up there. Now I'm going to come in more black, start at the bottom and go all the way across again. I don't want any of this to be pure black. I'm going to save the pure black for the centers of my daisies here. But this is our underpainting, and it's going to make the daisies, painting with just white, look white over the top. So notice how I'm making streaks with the black. I'm not just making it solid and all the same value, meaning all the same darkness across. I'm leaving it lighter in some areas and darker in others. And remembering, if I keep brushing over this, I just don't stop. It's just going to kind of get darker, darker and darker. All right, so I'm liking how that is looking. Yeah, I think that's good. This is standing out as a little too yellow for me. So what I'm gonna do is first, while my brush has this dark paint on it, I'll go ahead and just carry that onto the edge over here just to get that off. And now I'll take my brush. If you wipe it on your paper towel first, it's gonna keep your water cleaner longer. And since we're painting with white, we want our water to be kind of clean. So I'm taking my brush, just wiping it off, and then cleaning it out in my glass and pressing it against the bottom of the glass and spinning it in a circle with a lot of pressure to get it clean, and then squeezing it out with my other hand again. And I'm just gonna add just a little bit more white up here because that yellow is just standing out a little bit too much for me. So if you're not sure when to stop, definitely take a step back, look at your painting from far away. A painting's meant to go up on the wall. It's not meant to be seen very up close. And especially when you've been working on a painting for a while, you start to kind of lose sight. You're only seeing the details, the little brush strokes. And I promise you, if you go to a big museum, I've gone and I've seen the Mona Lisa, I've seen all sorts of paintings that we know and we love, and we know the picture from far away. And when you go up to the museum and you get very close to the painting, you see, oh wow, this looks kind of messy when I'm really up close. I'm seeing all the brush strokes. And that's just kind of how paint works. So take a step back, look at it from far away, or take a picture on your phone, and that can help you kind of see it in a different perspective. All right, so we're gonna let this dry before we go on to the next step. So you can use a blow dryer like me, or you can just wait until it dries, have a little snack, a little rest, and paint your edges if you'd like to. All right, so once your background is dry, you can kind of look to the side and see if you see a little bit of a sheen to look for wet spots, and then you can lightly touch it to see, but it should look pretty matte when it's dry. And we're gonna start to add in our daisies. So I threw in both of these brushes because everybody paints with their own unique style and everybody has a different relationship with the paint. You may find that you prefer the Filbert, or you may find that you really like the pointed round brush, but it can be done with either of these brushes. And that pointed round has lived a hard life, so I'm gonna get just a nicer one here to do these daisies. Okay, so we're gonna start off by outlining our daisies. So you can use either of these brushes. I'm gonna show you how both of these brushes work first. So you can take your Filbert brush, dip it in your water, dab it on your paper towel, and grab some white paint. So how this brush works, you can use the edge of it to make a very thin line. And let me use black so that you can really see. So I can use the edge of this to make a very thin line. Even if I'm using the edge, if I press down really hard, I'll get a thicker line. And the harder you press, the thicker the line gets. This brush can also be used where you use the flat side and it makes a nice, really rounded brush stroke. So that's the Filbert brush, which is great for little flower petals. Now the pointed round brush, very similar, but you have to try a little bit harder in order to make a thin line. It's easier with the Filbert. It's kind of like using a small flat brush. So if I'm using a pointed round brush, if I very lightly glide along the canvas, I can make a thinner line, but it's also a little bit more difficult to make it straight. And then the harder I press down my brush, the thicker my line is going to get. And if I press down really hard, see, it makes a very similar brush stroke to the Filbert. It's slightly more pointy at the top, but it's still pretty rounded. So you can use either of these brushes, whatever you kind of feel like you're more comfortable with, and you might switch with the different flowers that you're using. So I right now would choose whichever brush you feel like you can make the thinnest lines with, because we're gonna first just kind of outline it. So I'm gonna take my pointed round brush here. I'm cleaning it out so that I can get white. And I want my paint to be a little bit thin and a little bit watery. So there's not any huge globs of paint on my brush, just kind of it's lightly covered with white. And that's for our outline. So I'm gonna do 3 flowers. So the first one is gonna be the biggest flower. So we want it to appear that it's the closest to us. So I'm gonna do the center for that flower first. And because we're viewing the flower from the side, the center isn't gonna be a big round circle. It's gonna look as though it's squished. It's gonna be more of an oval shape. So I'm gonna come in this corner here and I'm gonna draw an oval that's going at an angle, okay? So I don't want it to go all the way up to the edge of the canvas, but it's gonna end just in a little bit. So if you want to, I can do some measurements for you here to make this a little bit easier. So go to your bottom right corner, and then I want you to go in towards the middle of your canvas about 2 inches and make a little mark there. Then I want you to go to your bottom left corner and go over about 3-4 inches and go up 1 inch and make a little mark there. And now same thing, bottom right corner, up 3 or 4 inches and go in 1 inch and make a little dot there. And that may help you kind of aim for where you're trying to place it. So now I'm using my pointed brush. I'm not gonna press down very hard. I'm very lightly gonna go in a circle, and I'm gonna end up with an oval shape here. So that's gonna be the center of my daisy. So from here, I'm gonna go ahead and do the center of my next one actually. So I'm going to go over to the left side of my canvas, go ahead and go up an eyeball about halfway up in this direction, go over about 3-4 inches, and then go down a little bit, because instead of placing it right in the middle of the center, I'm gonna go down a little bit. So I'm in about 3 or 4 inches and I'm down just a couple inches, and I'm gonna add in the center for my other daisy over here. And this one's gonna be straight on, so it's gonna be a circle. My last daisy is gonna be floating up here at the top. And for that daisy's outline, I'm just gonna do a V shape because it's gonna be pointing upwards. So if you want yours going straight up, you would do a V pointing straight up. I want mine kind of going off at an angle here. So I'm coming somewhere in this top right corner here, and you wanna leave enough space to have the petals at the top. But I'm coming somewhere in this top corner here, and I'm doing a V shape. But it's aiming this direction rather than straight up. Grab more watery paint if you need to, and we're gonna start to sketch in our petals. So the direction of the petals is gonna be important. So I'm gonna start off with the easiest one. So here is the bottom right corner of my canvas. This petal, if you hold your paintbrush in that direction, that's the exact direction your petal's gonna go. So I'm using my brush with very little pressure, and I'm gonna start off, I'm doing a line that's curving just a little bit towards the bottom left, and I'm gonna go out towards the center of the canvas. Look, I'm almost hitting the center of the canvas. And now I'm gonna do another brush stroke, and it's gonna curve slightly to the right in the opposite direction. And now I'm gonna go to the right of that. I'm gonna do the same thing again. And so I'm gonna use the terms downward and upward rather than slightly to the left, slightly to the right. But know there, for each petal, one line curves down, one line turns up, okay? So now I'm gonna leave a little bit of space there. I'm gonna do another one. Now this one's gonna start to point slightly upwards. So a line curving slightly downwards, and then a line curving slightly upwards. But they're aiming a little bit more this direction. When you start to run out of paint, just grab more water. Don't grab more paint because we want this to be super, super light. My next petal is gonna point almost straight up on the canvas. So I'm gonna go up just a little bit on my center here. And I'm keeping my paint kind of bright white just so you guys can see it. You're not gonna be able to see it if I make mine really light, but yours should be just bright enough so that you can see it, but still very light. Now for my next one, it's gonna go right off the edge of the canvas. So I'm starting on my center here. I'm doing a line curving to the left, and then it just goes right off the edge there. And then I need to come to the other side. This one's gonna start to point towards the left center of my canvas. And don't feel like all of your petals need to be exactly the same size or perfect. If you go out and look in nature, it's gonna be very difficult to find a daisy that has all the exact same size petals. Some of them are a little bit wrinkled, a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter, so you can definitely have variation in your petals. So now my next one is gonna go to the left. So it's aiming towards the left of my canvas here. And then I'm gonna do another one. And depending on how big your petals ended up being, this one may go off the edge of the canvas, or you may be able to fit the whole thing in. Just fit whatever you can there. And now as we get down here towards the bottom, the petals that are right here in the bottom corner, they're gonna look like little ovals, just like the center did, because they're coming straight towards us. So I'm gonna do two of them. So I'm gonna do one on the left and one on the right. And so I'm just spinning my brush in a circle. I've got barely any white paint on there. And those are the petals that are coming towards us. Now I need to fill in whatever I still have room for. So I need a line here to finish off this petal that's going off the edge. And then I'm just gonna imagine where the other petal would be right here, going off the edge, same thing, going off the edge, and then maybe I had room for another one right here, going straight down. So we've got two little ovals, and then these ones are going right off the edge of the canvas here. Now I'm gonna do my medium size flowers outline, my daisy. So this one's gonna be a little bit easier. Remember to use your really watery light paint. I'm gonna make mine brighter so that you can really see. So my petal that is on the top is gonna go straight up. And these petals, I'm gonna make these about 3 inches long, whereas these were really big, right? They're about this size. I do have small hands, but they're about the length of my hand. So the one on top is going to go straight up. The one on bottom is going to go straight down. And then you can add, sometimes this helps people if you just do the main directions first, north, east, south, and west there, then it can be easier to go and fill in the ones on the sides. And daisies often have little gaps. So if you wanted to leave a little gap in between some petals, you can. So now I've got one at 2 o'clock, somewhere around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 10:30, down to the left and down to the right. So we're gonna save this little one for later. The next step we're gonna do is we're gonna add in a second layer of petals that are coming in from behind. Again, for this, it's really important that you don't have too much white paint. So if you think you have too much, take your brush, dip it in your water, and get most of it out. So now I'm gonna come in and I'm not gonna do a full brush stroke. I'm gonna do just very light outline that there's a petal in between each of these. So you can start off, I'm gonna come in between these two here, and I'm doing a little kind of V shape. Same thing here, I'm gonna do a little V shape in between each of these sets of petals. And now I'm gonna do the same thing on my little one. So in between each row, or each two petals, I'm gonna add in a little V behind it. And these petals, or these two flowers, should end up touching just a little bit. All right, so for the next step, we're gonna start to actually fill these in. This is the exciting, fun part. So start off with the same kind of barely any paint on your brush first. And we're gonna do these main petals first, and we'll do the little corner ones in the background afterwards. So main petals first, you're gonna start at the end of your petal, and I want you to flick your brush in towards the center, okay? So it should be barely any paint, and if you're using your Filbert, I'll show you what that looks like. Same thing, using the flat side, so you were probably using the edge to outline your petals. Now I want you to use the flat part and flick your brush in towards the center. So go ahead and choose which brush you like the best. I honestly like both. I think the Filbert makes a really nice kind of feathered out effect underneath. But I also like how the pointed one makes the petals a little more pointy. But you can have yours pointy or you can have them round. That's really up to you. So I'm going into the ends here with white. My brush is pretty watery. Oops, I did on the back one even though I said not to. Sorry, pretend that didn't happen there. Getting a little ahead of myself. And now you can make it brighter and brighter as you keep adding layers over the top of it. So I keep getting so excited and keep working on the back petals, so I'll just show you those really quick. So for those, I'm gonna try to have white mainly on one side. So yes, you outline both sides, but now I'm gonna pick one side that I add more white to. So I'm gonna do the left side of each of my petals. So I'm gonna add more white, and I'm working on the back layer, the ones that are underneath, more white to the left side. And as you get towards here, it's going to be towards the bottom because that's still the left side of the petal. So more white to the left and having it fade out as it goes to the right. It's definitely okay to have the texture of the canvas showing in this painting, because if you add too much water, you still end up with the same kind of texture showing. So don't worry about having the texture. In some paintings, you're kind of trying to stay away from that, but in this one, it's totally fine. So after you start to kind of build it up, you can start to go closer to the middle. So I'm getting kind of some streaks of white in here. That's going to be easier to do with the pointed brush than it is with the Filbert. So look at this petal right now and see how it's so transparent. We can really see through it. So watch as I add on more white, another layer of white, right? It starts to really stand out. So when you're adding on your white, if you make it so your handle is close to your canvas, it's going to help you to lay the paint on a little more thickly. And if your brush is aiming straight upwards, what's going to happen is you're going to dig the paint off. So if your brush is perpendicular, you're going to dig the paint off. And if your brush is parallel to the canvas, you're going to lay it on and it'll become more opaque. So these petals that are down here going off the edge of the canvas, same thing, you'll just have the white kind of coming off the edge of the canvas there. And then you can start to go over your edges a little bit more, where you originally outlined your daisy. It can be brighter now. And with some of your petals, they'll kind of grow and get larger the more that you filled them in. And you kind of have to decide which one is on top. Whichever one is on top is going to have the bright white. Kind of going over the other petal. So down here with these ones, I'm going to add more white, these two little oval ones, on the top. So you can do a brush stroke going sideways across the top of it. And then you can wipe your brush off and just lightly, without adding more paint, you can brush over the middle so that it kind of fades away there. So more white on the top edge of it. And it'll get darker towards the bottom. So I'm just adding one more little layer of white to the ends. To make them really stand out. And now I'm gonna make these ones here a little bit more white. So I'm gonna fill them in with just a little bit more. I'll keep some of the others a little bit darker, but these ones that are in the front here, I'm gonna make them just a little bit whiter. I want them to really stand out. And while this paint is still wet, making sure that I have the bottoms clearly outlined where I can see them, so I don't kind of lose any of my petals. I'm going to come in with some black from down here in the bottom. So I'm going to wipe my brush off here, clean it out. And now I'm going to take some black, not too much, work it into my brush here. And I'm going to start from the bottom of the petal now, and I'm going to flick my brush upwards towards the tip of the petal. So the direction of your brush strokes need to follow the direction of the petal. And what's going to happen is you're going to pick up a little bit of white paint as you go. It's going to turn a little bit gray, and that's what you want to happen. So my brush strokes are starting towards the middle, and I'm flicking my brush. So I'll do it slow so you can really see the direction. So I start my handles aiming towards the left, and I'm flicking, and it's going back in the other direction. And that's giving me lots of little kind of streaky brush strokes. And now I'm going to try to have them be kind of all different lengths. So maybe it goes up really far on the petal, and then maybe it's shorter and then a little bit longer. Your brush needs to be a little bit wet in order for it to really kind of blend in. And it's kind of a push and pull of how you build it up. And I can add just a little bit of shadow down here to these guys that are going off the edge. And so wherever the gray goes into the white on the daisy, instead of thinking about that as gray or thinking of that about that as black, I want you to just think about it as shadow, right? Because when you have something that's white and it curves a little bit, there's a shadow. So let me see if I can show you with this canvas, right? So the canvas is all the same color. It's all white. But look at how this is appearing to be dark and this is appearing to be light. So it's the same thing with fabric. It's the same thing with anything that is white. So if I have a paper towel, you can see that some of it looks pure white and some of it looks gray. It's the same thing with your petals. So anywhere where there's gray, it's just a fold in the petal. So I'm just coming in with my black still. And then you can also add, while there's barely any black on your brush, just a teeny little bit, you can come in right here, these petals in the back. You can add just a teeny little bit of black. Not a lot. It doesn't need a lot. And then here you have these little spaces, right, that are open and there's nothing there. You can come in with barely any paint on your brush, and you can add a little bit of black in between just to add a little shadow there. As I'm looking at my painting through the camera, what I'm noticing is my petals look all just a little bit too much the same. They all look exactly the same size and the black comes exactly halfway up. And so I want to mess that up a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do, since I still have black paint on my brush, is I'm going to take the black up just a little bit further on a few of them. So maybe I'll choose this one to be behind. So I'm going to come up and come up a little bit further on that one. Now maybe I'll pick another one to come up just a little bit further, make a little darker. Maybe this one, it's over here on the side. Maybe I'll make this one just a little bit blacker here towards the center. So I'm just adding a little bit of variation. And now I can come in, wipe my brush off, clean it out in my water, and come back in with the white again. So maybe adding some fresh white over another layer over the top to make it a little bit brighter. And then you can choose, like right now I have this dark shadow here, so I'm going to have this petal go over the top. So I'm getting a lot of thick white paint on my brush here, and I know this one's going to be on top, so I'm going to go right over that black edge there, and now this petal appears to be on top. And I wiggled my brush just a little bit so that it looks curvy like a petal. And maybe just like we had the black come out a little bit further, maybe the white comes down a little bit further. And some of the others. And if you see any two petals that are really just kind of, they blended together, they've become one, you can go in there, pick which one's going to be on top, get some thick paint on the side of your filbert or your pointed brush, and just really go over it again, just along the edge, to just get some clear definition as to which one is on top. So those two were kind of blended together. These two are kind of blended together here too. So I'm getting white, I'm getting it really globbed on kind of one side, and then I'm going to place that paint on whichever side I want the petal to be on top. So right here, I'm going to add a thicker white edge to this one to make it kind of stand out there. Since this petal is aiming upwards, I'm going to add some extra white here to this top edge. So it looks like the light is really kind of hitting it. Same thing with this little one here. Just give it a little extra oomph there. And now you're ready, you can go on to your next little one. So that big one kind of gave you a lot of practice, kind of playing with the paint there. So we're gonna do the same thing on this one. So start off with white, watery on your brush. You're adding white to the ends of your petals and then dragging it in towards the center. So brighter at the end, lighter as it goes towards the center. Same thing with the ones that are in the back row there. I didn't add a petal over here. I think I still want one, but I think I'm gonna have it be a little bit shorter. So come in and just do a little short one in the background there. So I've got my first layer here. Come in now with a little bit more white paint, starting on the end. And I'm sorry if you guys are hearing a ton of background noise today. I don't know what is going on, like everybody is out in town today or what. I don't live on that busy of a street, but I just hear so much going on outside. So it's a little bit loud. And then you can go over the edges with more paint now that you've got it kind of in there. You can start to establish it a little bit more. I'm going to go through and do one last layer of white on the ends of some of my petals just to make sure they're really popping and standing out. You don't have to do it on all of them. You can do it on just some of them. And while you have the white, if you wanted to come in on any of these petals, if they needed a little pop, you could do that as well. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this one, this medium one that I did on the big one. So taking my brush, cleaning it out, taking the black, and you know what, I'm going to use gray instead of black because I think black's going to be too harsh because this one has lighter colors behind it. This one's already dark down here. So I think the black's just going to look a little bit too stark. We'll save that for the center. So I'm going to do some gray. So I'll take black now, mix a little bit of white in it. So sorry I made you clean your brush out. You didn't really need to since you were making gray. Okay, so I'm going to take this gray, add just a little bit of water to my paint here. starting from the center, flicking my brush out. See, even that's a dark gray. It looks almost black. And I think it looks just a little too stark. So I'm adding more white. Yeah, I want a lighter gray, honestly. Let's try that out. Okay, so starting in the center and flicking your brush out towards the ends of the petals. And you'll pick up some of the white paint from your petals being still wet. That's totally fine. The background shows through. It's totally fine. It's kind of the purpose of this painting and the way that it's done. I'm getting a lot of like really thin lines because my brush is kind of dry and fanned out, but I'm just kind of running with it, kind of like it. So I'm adding a little shadow to the petals that are in the background there. Now I'll go for the darker gray. Just make it just a little bit darker, right towards the center. Woo! Went crazy there. Well, I'm getting buck wild over here, so I gotta calm it down. And then if you wanted to go in with some white again to make some separation between your petals and deciding which one is on top again, you can. So cleaning your brush out. Get your brush nice and flat. Dip one side in white. And find the petals that are running together. Put the white on the side that you want the petal to be on top. Thick white paint. And go over it. You can see how now that one is clearly on top. Same thing, I'm going to go right here. Clearly on top now. If you pick up too much black, you can clean out your brush and go again. And you can also brush the white down into your gray now. Same thing like we did with the bigger one, just to add some variation. So the white goes all the way down on some of your petals. Getting some nice little streaks in there. So cleaning your brush out, you can go one more time with another layer of white if any of your petals needed to stand out. Just a little bit more. And we're gonna move on to our little bitty flower that's floating up there. Okay, so I'm going to show you this on the side, and I'll show you in yellow so that you can really kind of see, and then I'll go onto the canvas here. So again, you can use either brush. So I'll show you with my pointed round brush first. So I have my V shape, and having the paint on my brush, I can start towards the outer part of the V, so not towards the middle, and I can press down hard and then release pressure as I come towards the middle. And that's going to give you little petals, okay? You can also have some that wiggle a little bit. You can leave a little bit of space. If you want to have a little space between one, you can have them really kind of curve in. And you can also make ones that are just a little bit thinner that look like they're behind. So variation is definitely going to help. So if you get confused easily with a lot of brush strokes all next to each other, you could start off doing some skinny ones. So not pressing down as hard so that you get little skinnier ones. And then kind of come in and layer in some thicker ones. And you can also lay them on top. So look, I have this skinny one here. I can come down, so this one's shorter but wider. And then it looks like it's in front there. So if you were doing that with your Filbert brush, the ends of your petals would just be a little bit rounder. So you can use the edge for your V. You can use the edge to do thinner petals, and then come in with the flat part and maybe make shorter, thicker ones in front. So I'm going to come in, getting all this yellow paint out of my brush here. I'm grabbing just white. I'm not going to press down too hard. My paint is a little bit watery. So I'll have some thinner ones. Maybe a little thin one off to the side there. And now I'll come in, press down a little bit harder. I'm going to have one kind of curving out there. That looks cute. I think I'm going to have another one kind of curving over here. I'm in a curvy mood right now. Let's do another little curvy one over there. So after you kind of get it in there, you can wipe your brush off on the side, grab some thicker white paint without having a damp brush. And you can do the same thing we did with the big ones. You can add a little bit of white just to the ends of some of them just to make them really kind of stand out. But this petal right here doesn't need to stand, or this flower doesn't need to stand out too much because it's kind of in the background there. So after you get it in white, I would take a very light gray. So don't need to clean your brush out. Just go to your gray mixture, and you can brush from the bottom up. So I'm just going to flick my brush upwards a little bit on each of these petals. And I'm releasing the pressure as I go out so that it kind of just fades off. So I've got a little bit of gray there. And if any of them are running too much together, you can use the gray to just kind of create a little bit of shadow. Very, very little. Not doing much there. Don't want it to stand out too much. And then you can do one last layer of white. So we're gonna add a little stem on this one, but we will wait. Will we? No, let's go in. Let's go in and do it now. So you can use either brush, you can use the edge of your filbert, or you can use your pointed round. And I'm gonna take a dark gray. I've got watery paint. It's gonna help me make a smooth line. And I'm gonna start off just doing kind of like a little wispy tail on this. So you can try on the side first so you can kind of get comfortable, feeling brave. Go off the edge. Now I'm gonna take my brush, wipe it off on the side. I'm gonna grab white. And I'm gonna trace over it. So it looks like it's kind of just fading off there. And I did that a little bit too thick, so it's okay. It's a good teaching moment. If you can't aim well, like I can't right now, you can take a damp paper towel and you can make it thin again. So just get your paper towel wet. Just kind of go over it. And then for the bottom here, I'm gonna take black and I'm gonna do little short brush strokes. And they're starting up and they're going towards the stem, but they're fanning out. So you can start with the middle one. Go straight down the middle. And then as you go to the left, they're aiming towards the left. As you go to the right, they're aiming towards the right. And some of your white paint should just be kind of mixing in there. And that's kind of the idea with that. So the last step is going to be our centers. So we're going to be using the same brush we used at the beginning, our large size 12 bristle brush. It's very important you get the extra water out. Otherwise you're going to get kind of a mess here. So get the extra water out. And we're going to use this brush kind of like a stamp. So it's nice and poofy at the end here. And if you need to, you can even scrub it in a circle against your paper just to get it nice and kind of fluffy there. And I'm going to take just plain black paint and I'm going to use this brush as a stamp. So repeatedly lifting up, tapping down with my handle perpendicular to my canvas. So I'm going to come in here and I'm stamping over my center. And you're gonna accidentally cover up the edges of these petals down here and we'll bring those back out at the very end. So start here, that way it'll dry before you get to the top there. And I'm gonna fill it all in. I'm making it nice and round at the top. Filling it in. And now now, I would spin your brush in a circle on your paint just to get the bristles to go a little bit closer together to do this small one. So I'm kind of stamping in one spot until it starts to get filled in, because we don't want this to be too big. If you have a smaller version of this brush and you want to use that, you can. All right, so after I get it in black, then I'm gonna come in and I'm going to, before we add in the yellow, you can use this brush while you barely have any black on it and just kind of flick your brush up from the center. If you need to make any of your petals just a little bit darker or have just a little bit more shadow to them. So go ahead and do that now before we go to add in our yellow. So just a little bit more shadow and it'll just bring it together a little bit more. Now I'm gonna redefine this edge. So I'm holding my brush so that the handle is closer to parallel, but I'm still gonna use that stamping technique. I'm gonna come in here and stamp and just kind of redefine that edge. All right, so now I'm gonna take my brush, I'm gonna clean it out in my water, and we're gonna stamp in yellow. So you could really use either of the yellows. You can use your more neutral yellow there. I don't know why, but with this, I just like a brighter yellow. So I'm going to take my brush, cleaned out, dry it off, not too much water. I'm going to grab that bright yellow, and it's not like I'm trying to cover up all the black, but I'm adding a highlight. So this, I'm kind of aiming for the top left of my little oval here, and I'm going to stamp my brush. And if I keep stamping in one area, it's just going to turn green. So I need to keep moving to a new spot every time I stamp. And as I run out of paint, I'm going to come further and further down on my oval here. So that it just kind of disappears and fades away there. So you should have some pretty thick yellow there. So I'd look at your painting from far away, decide, do I want to do another layer or not? If you decide you want to do another layer, wipe off any black paint you've picked up. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the other yellow too. I like to just go crazy whenever I'm finishing a painting. Let's just I like to use all the paint, throw it all on there. And I'm just going to go over this again. Stamping and moving. Move to a different spot. Grab more paint if you need it. And now I'm starting to kind of lightly, very lightly touch. So I'm getting lots of nice texture in there. Now I can wipe my brush off so there's not so much. Lightly stamp over it. And it kind of blends in. So you can leave it like this. Some people like to do the more kind of rounded daisy centers. And if you wanted to do that, you could kind of stamp in a circle. So I'm just going to give you that as an option, but I'm not going to do that. But I am going to make sure that my top edge here is a little more rounded. All right, so now I'm going to go down to my little medium one, and let's go ahead and clean your brush out. You may find that this is easier with your Filbert or your pointed brush. So I'll show you two ways you can do it. You can use this brush, and what I would do is just put the yellow on one side of the brush. Don't dip the whole thing in yellow. So if the end of your brush is kind of round, get the yellow just on one side. It's just on one side there, and then choose which side you want the highlight to be on. I'm gonna have mine on whatever's closest to the right edge of the canvas here. And I'm very lightly touching. So let's say that was a little too crazy for you with that giant brush. You could use your pointed brush and do the same thing. And just kind of lightly dab with the yellow. And you can also do a teeny tiny little bit of black coming onto your petals, as though the center is just casting a little bit of a shadow. And it also just helps it look integrated, right? So that the center doesn't look like it's just this completely separate thing that we just added on top. You want it to look like it's a part. It's a part of it. So if anything turns, you know, if it turns too yellow, you wanted more texture to it, you could stamp black over the top of it. And that'll kind of blend it in just a little bit. Same thing over here. You could even use your pointed brush in here. So let's say it just got too much yellow. I like to have, I don't know why I even like this, but I love to have a nice kind of defined black edge. Just want it to really kind of stand out. So I'm just going through lightly stamping with the black just to make sure I get a nice defined edge there. And then you can look at the finished product. You can decide, do you want this to stand out just a little bit more? You could come in with a little more black. If you wanted that to be a little bit more defined, definitely look at your painting from far away and decide kind of what it needs. You go over any of your petals with white again to make them stand out more. This one's had a little time to dry and it kind of fades into the background. So you could come in, you know, now that it's dried a little bit and add some thicker white paint to the ends to help them stand out a little bit more. And don't forget about these little guys. So now that that black is dried, and if it hasn't, you can take your finger and kind of wipe over it just to get any wet black paint off of there. I would go over these again. So I'd go over so that it looks like it's in front. It's closer to you and it's blocking the center of your daisy there. So if your brush is kind of watery, that's perfect. Just kind of brush down a little bit and then go in, make your brush flat. You can use your Filbert or your pointed. Same little trick. Dip one side in the white, line that up on the top, and drag it across. I'm also gonna take my bristle brush, clean it out, and I'm gonna stamp just a little bit of white into the center of my flower here. Not a lot, I barely got any paint. And I'm gonna lightly add that in there. And that's just gonna integrate the centers into the rest of the painting a little bit more so that it doesn't just look like it's this complete own thing. So I just stamped a little bit of white in there. And that is the last step. So when you're all finished with your painting, you can sign your painting if you'd like to. You can set it back and sit with it for a little while, decide if you want to do any more. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video and for painting with me. It's so fun. I really love to do this, and I love to see your comments. So thank you so much for painting with me. I hope you love your painting, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.